Packard had survived the Depression, built Rolls-Royce Merlin engines for war, and returned to showrooms with one of the most respected names in American luxury. Then, in 1954, it bought Studebaker. On paper, the deal created a stronger independent automaker. In reality, Packard approved it without a reliable answer to the most basic question: how many cars did Studebaker have to sell just to break even? 21 months after the new corporation was formed, true Packard production in Detroit was over. This is how a rescue plan became the decision that sealed Packard's fate. The ending feels almost impossible when you look at where Packard began. James Ward Packard built his first automobile in Warren, Ohio in 1899. Within a few years, Packard had become a name associated with precise engineering, quiet power, and owners who did not need to announce what their car had cost. The machinery justified the reputation. Packard put its twin-six V12 into production in 1915, then developed a smooth, straight 8 that became central to the Marque for decades. Its cars carried formal bodies, long hoods, and the kind of restrained authority that made them natural choices for business leaders, celebrities, and heads of state. Before Cadillac became America's default luxury name, Packard was the standard many buyers measured it against, but prestige alone could not protect any automaker from the Great Depression. Packard responded in 1935 with the 120, a less expensive car built in higher volume. Purists could call that a retreat down market. In the moment, it was a remarkably effective survival move. Packard followed it with the even less expensive 110, and in 1937 the company built more than 109,000 cars, the best year in its history. That success created a tension Packard never fully resolved. The lower-priced cars provided the volume that kept the company alive, but every step toward the mass market made the Packard badge less exclusive. The company needed scale without becoming ordinary. It needed to compete with Cadillac without the resources of General Motors. And it needed lower-priced customers without teaching luxury buyers that a Packard was simply another family car. For a while, war work pushed that problem aside. During World War II, Packard manufactured Rolls-Royce Merlin aircraft engines under license, including engines used in the North American P-51 Mustang. It also built powerful marine engines for patrol torpedo boats. The company proved that its engineering organization could deliver sophisticated machinery on an enormous scale. Victory should have opened a new golden age. Instead, the post-war market exposed every weakness an independent manufacturer carried into the 1950s. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler could spread the cost of engines, transmissions, bodies, styling studios, advertising, and dealer support across multiple divisions. Packard had one name, one primary product line, and far less room for a failed model year. Its post-war cars increasingly occupied the upper middle of the market, an uncomfortable place where expensive Packards could meet well-equipped Buicks and Oldsmobiles, while senior Packards still had to challenge Cadillac and Lincoln. There was another problem hidden in plain sight. Packard continued refining its famous straight 8, while the market's attention shifted toward modern overhead valve V8s. Packard would eventually create an excellent new V8 of its own, but it would not reach customers until 1955. By then, the company was trying to finance a new engine, new styling, new manufacturing arrangements, and a new corporate future at the same time. That is where James Nance entered the story. Nance became Packard's president in May of 1952. He was energetic, ambitious, and determined to restore a clear distinction between the Clipper line and the senior Packards. He also understood the brutal arithmetic. Packard needed greater volume and access to more manufacturing capacity. Standing alone was becoming less of a proud choice and more of a countdown. Nance was not the only executive thinking about consolidation. George Mason of Nash Kelvinator believed America's remaining independent automakers needed to combine while they were still strong enough to bargain. His broad idea was to bring Nash, Hudson, Packard, and Studebaker into a fourth full-line company that could challenge the Big Three. The first half of that plan happened in 1954, when Nash and Hudson formed American Motors. Packard and Studebaker were supposed to become the other pair. Eventually, the two new corporations might come together. From a distance, the logic was compelling. Packard had engineering talent, a valuable luxury name, and a new V8 and automatic transmission under development. Studebaker had a larger dealer network, greater production capacity, and a presence in the lower-priced market. Put them together, and each company appeared to supply what the other lacked. This is the moment when the obituary turns. The fatal decision was not that Packard considered a partner. It was choosing a partner before understanding how much that partner needed to survive. Studebaker looked like the larger company. It employed roughly 15,000 people compared with Packard's 9,000, and its dealer network was about twice as large. Its factories in South Bend could build hundreds of thousands of cars. Those numbers suggested scale. They did not reveal whether that scale was efficient. Studebaker's labor and production costs were dangerously high. The company needed a huge number of sales merely to cover them. During the negotiations, Studebaker presented a break-even figure of 165,899 cars to the institutions financing the new corporation. That was not a typo or a rough target. It was presented as a number precise enough to build a rescue plan around. On August 16, 1954, Packard's board unanimously approved the purchase of Studebaker. Shareholders approved the combination soon afterward. Only then did Packard treasurer Walter Grant spend a weekend at Studebaker headquarters, digging through the books and trying to establish a solid break-even point. He could not. For a deal meant to create certainty, that is the kind of missing number that should freeze a boardroom. That missing number mattered more than the factories, the dealers, or the optimistic press releases. If Studebaker could not sell enough cars to support its own overhead, Packard was not acquiring the scale that would save it. Packard was assuming responsibility for a larger cash drain. The Studebaker-Packard Corporation officially came into existence on October 1, 1954. 1 week later, George Mason died unexpectedly. The architect of the larger four-company consolidation was gone, and American Motors under George Romney had its own survival strategy. The bridge from Studebaker-Packard to a truly competitive fourth automaker was suddenly far less certain. Yet the most painful part of this story is that Packard itself was about to prove it could still build a remarkable automobile. For 1955, Packard introduced its long-awaited V8 and an updated twin Ultramatic transmission. The Senior Patrician, 400 and Caribbean received dramatically fresh styling, even though the basic body structure dated back to 1951. The new torsion-level suspension connected the front and rear wheels with long torsion bars, giving the cars an unusually level, controlled ride. Motor Trend praised the system as a genuinely new approach to production car suspension. These were not the products of a company that had forgotten engineering. They were evidence that the old Packard ability was still alive. The production numbers responded. Packard built 55,247 cars for the 1955 model year, up from 31,291 in 1954. By March, the Packard division was earning a profit. It also produced thousands of V8 engines for senior Nash and Hudson models. Then the merger arithmetic swallowed the good news. Studebaker increased production too, but its division still lost money. In the first quarter of 1955, the combined corporation reported a loss of $5.7 million. Packard could design a better car, lift its own production, and make its own division profitable, yet still be pulled downward by the company it had purchased for protection. Somehow, the better Packard performed, the clearer the combined problem became. The rescue was now draining the rescuer. Packard also complicated its comeback with a disruptive factory move. In September of 1954, final assembly left the spacious East Grand Boulevard complex for the much smaller Connor Avenue plant, where Packard bodies were already being made. Moving the operation required roughly 6,000 truckloads of machinery and tooling. Production stopped for about 2 months, and the cramped new arrangement contributed to serious quality problems on early 1955 cars. That distinction is important. Studebaker did not create every Packard problem. Packard had moved down market, lost defense business, waited too long for its V8, depended on outside body production, and accepted a difficult assembly plan before the merger could deliver any benefit. Ford and General Motors were also fighting a price and volume war that punished smaller manufacturers. But before buying Studebaker, those were Packard's problems to solve. After the purchase, Packard had all of its old problems plus Studebaker's larger cost structure. The decision removed the one resource Packard needed most: room to recover. By 1956, the escape routes were disappearing. American Motors developed its own V8, ending an important Packard-engine relationship. It rejected the idea of joining with Studebaker Packard. Recalls and quality concerns hurt the 1956 Packards. Sales fell hard, and the corporation approached bankruptcy. On June 25, 1956, Packard production ended in Detroit. The company entered an arrangement with Curtiss Wright, and James Nance resigned. In only a few years, his plan to rebuild Packard as the luxury anchor of a major independent group had collapsed. The badge survived for 2 more model years, but the identity did not. The 1957 and 1958 Packards were built in South Bend on Studebaker foundations. They carried altered sheet metal, Packard trim, and familiar emblems, but long-time customers could see what had happened. A Marque that once set the terms of American luxury was now asking a decorated Studebaker body to carry the weight of its history. One former Packard dealer later remembered that his professional customers, including doctors and attorneys, had little interest in buying Studebakers after the merger. His dealership turned instead to Lincoln and Cadillac. That reaction captures the damage more clearly than any balance sheet. Packard had spent decades making its name mean status. Once the product no longer delivered the expected identity, the badge could not manufacture prestige by itself. The final Packard-badged cars were built in 1958. There would be no grand return, no new Detroit Packard, and no second chance to separate the marque from the corporation that had consumed its remaining resources. It is tempting to reduce all of this to one foolish merger. History is rarely that clean. Packard was already vulnerable, and remaining independent might have ended badly too. The new V8 arrived late. The Connor Avenue move damaged quality. Its place in the market had blurred. The big three controlled money, suppliers, dealers, and advertising on a scale Packard could not match. Still, the Studebaker purchase was the point of no return. Packard committed itself before it possessed a detemporary measure of Studebaker's break-even burden. The deal looked like added volume, but much of that volume was structurally unprofitable. It looked like a step toward a larger alliance, but Mason's death and Romney's refusal left Studebaker Packard standing alone, and it happened just as Packard's own new cars were demonstrating that the Marque had not lost its technical talent. That is the cruel status reversal at the heart of Packard's obituary. The company did not die because its final true cars were irrelevant. It died while those cars were winning praise, gaining production, and returning the Packard division to profit. The stronger product arrived inside a corporation too weak to give it time. Collectors understand what the market could no longer support. A surviving Caribbean, 400, Patrician, or earlier Packard still carries the evidence in its proportions, detailing, engineering, and road manners. These cars are not valuable merely because the factory closed. They are valuable because they make the loss visible. Packard was not a forgotten experiment. It was one of the great American Marques, and for decades it knew exactly how a luxury automobile should feel. The lesson is larger than Packard. A famous name can survive a weak year. It can survive a late engine or a confused model line. What it may not survive is a rescue deal that destroys its ability to fix those mistakes. Packard bought Studebaker because management believed 2 vulnerable companies could create one strong one. Instead, the merger joined Packard's limited time to Studebaker's hidden burden. Less than 2 years later, Detroit stopped building Packards. And 2 years after that, the name was gone. Which lost American Marque should receive the next obituary: Studebaker, DeSoto, or AMC. Packard should be remembered not only for the way it ended, but for the standard it once set. The fatal decision explains the closing chapter. The cars explain why people still wish the story had continued.